if I can step outside and move a little bit, I generally find that helps. It helps to get away from the situation that is causing the dysregulation, because sometimes you can get stuck in a bubble. I also think, again, like doing challenging activities has helped me, because I think being in the mountains, you learn to solve problems, and you also learn to like really evaluate what's worth being stressed about.
Welcome to Season 2 of ADHD Difference. I'm your host, Julie Legg, ADHD advocate, author of The Missing Piece, a woman's guide to understanding, diagnosing and living with ADHD, and an unapologetic doer of many things. This season, we're turning up the volume with a global lineup of brilliant guests, bringing their lived experiences, insights, research, strategies and resources. And of course, along with a healthy dose of humour and humility. Whether you're neurodivergent yourself or just curious, there's something here for every curious brain. Let's dive in. Today, I'm joined by Ryan DeLena, a professional mountaineer and mental health advocate, author and documentarian, who has skied to some of the most remote places on Earth, including Antarctica and Svalbard. But before any of that, Ryan was a child repeatedly restrained in therapeutic school, misunderstood, dysregulated, and searching for relief. Everything changed when he discovered the outdoors. Skiing became more than a passion. It became a way to regulate, heal, and reclaim his sense of self. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
Look, your childhood was very different from most, including being restrained. Can you take us back to those early years and share what it felt like for you then?
Yeah, it was really challenging because at a very young age, they identified that I learned differently and I struggled in a traditional classroom setting. And the best answer that they had at the time was to move me to a therapeutic school. And essentially, their method of behavior modification at this school was anytime you got out of line and weren't willing to sit in a timeout chair, they would just restrain you. Sometimes they didn't even give you that option. Sometimes they'd move straight to a restraint. And in other programs I saw down the line, it was usually used as a last resort. But in this particular program, it was actually kind of part of their methodology in a way. They thought if they just restrained you enough, eventually you'd stop misbehaving. And it kind of had the opposite effect on me because I was learning to associate conflict with adults ending in violence. And this was back before the laws changed. So they could restrain you on the floor, they could get on top of you, they could cover your mouth. So I'd go home with bruises, I'd feel like I couldn't breathe. It was a really traumatizing experience. And this started from the age of kindergarten. So from when I was 5 to when I was 9, I was being restrained regularly. And they taught every babysitter I had as a kid how to do this, any family members who were regularly around me. And it took, ultimately, my dad stopped doing it at home. And he noticed that I was much calmer and much better behaved at home. And that was when he first started to question, like, maybe they're wrong about this. Maybe there isn't just some threshold we need to reach of it getting worse before it gets better. Maybe it's only getting worse, and we've been wrong all along. And once he started challenging the schools, then that really was the beginning of the fight.
And looking back now, how do you understand your younger self?
Yeah, I went through a whole journey of diagnosis in my lifetime. Pretty early on, they tried to rule out ADHD because I was getting more hyper from taking the ADHD medication than less hyper. Now in my adult life, my most recent therapy experience has kind of confirmed that, like, I was definitely ADHD all along, and I've been following some informational accounts about it as well, and learning about how some of the traits can express themselves, and like it's very clearly what I was dealing with all along. But at the time, they tried to like treated as like autism spectrum disorder. And then once I had PTSD, they were treating it as like a mood disorder, or some sort of like early bipolar. So I was being medicated like I was bipolar. And then obviously it wasn't working because I was still being triggered by the same things because it was trauma that I was working through, not a mood disorder. So they'd, keep upping the doses and keep not having it work. So I went through this whole other journey of going on all these medications and then having to go off all of these medications. And currently I don't take any medication, and that's been the best thing for me. But it's really challenging when you're misdiagnosed. And again, they're kind of expecting that it'll get worse until it gets better, but it's actually only getting worse because we've had the wrong idea.
When you look at other children around you growing up, what do you think made your experience so different, and what do you wish the adults in your life had understood about you back then?
Yeah, when I was younger, I think one of the things I struggled with is that I was a very kinesthetic learner, and I wasn't really being taught to my learning style. Like this sort of sit still and be lectured style wasn't working for me, and I think I just needed to be engaged more. I think another thing is that I was just really young at the time when really big decisions about my life were being made. So don't forget, this all started when I was in preschool, when I was like 4 or 5 years old. I got moved to this first therapeutic school when I was in kindergarten. So, how much concept of what a productive member of society looks like did you have when you were 5? All I knew is that I would get up and walk around the classroom, do whatever I wanted when I was 5, and people would get up and follow me. All of a sudden, I'm in this therapeutic school. Now when I do that, I get punished, and I get punished physically. So it was this very stark shift in my life. And I think I needed to grow out of some things. I needed to get to a point where I could understand that, like, all right, like, if every time I get up and I walk around, like, I get in trouble, that's kind of annoying to always be in trouble. And, maybe I don't want to, like, go to the principal's office, or maybe I don't want to go home and have my dessert taken away or something. And then you start to fall in line. That's how everybody learns. Everybody learns that doing what you want all the time, while fun in theory, is not worth it because it comes with consequences. And I just didn't have the concept of that when I was 5. So I wish the adults in my life at the time gave me a little bit more grace and, maybe let me get into some of the higher grades and grow up a little bit. And if things still weren't working, maybe then we consider other options. But we just made the decision so quickly.
So at some point for you, skiing and the outdoors became a turning point, not just a hobby, but a lifeline. What was it about being in the mountains that helped regulate what nothing else seemed to reach?
I think at the most basic level in the very beginning, when I was a kid, I just loved it. I just really enjoyed skiing and, being out in nature, challenging myself, just the physical act of sliding on snow. But I think as I've grown, I've come to understand some of like the deeper healing powers, and ultimately, being in the outdoors, especially in the mountains, and challenging yourself and kind of going through these elective challenges where you're intentionally putting yourself into a situation where you do need to rise to the occasion and do this hard thing. And not only is it rewarding when you overcome these challenges, but you build self-efficacy in knowing that you are a person who can approach a challenging thing or goal and see it through. And I think that it's just become my lens for understanding the world. I've gone through experiences of overcoming self-doubt, overcoming pessimism, like these sort of patterns that are put into your brain through trauma. You can overcome them by going and doing challenging things in the mountains. And I think that's the power of it. Doing elective hardship activities just yields stronger, more capable people. But there's also the aspect of getting away from the noise. And I think that the outdoors, aside from offering challenge, can also offer peace. It's just nice to be out there. And one of the nice things about it is the mountains aren't prejudiced against you. On one hand, that can make them dangerous because the mountains don't pick favorites. You can be experienced and you could have no experience and the danger still remains the same. But it also means that you can be anybody and you can show up to the mountains and you can rise to the occasion and you can find enjoyment out of them. So it offers a place where maybe if in your life you're experiencing judgment or separateness from what you're going through, you can go to these outdoor spaces that don't judge you. They don't care who you are. You can just go there and enjoy them.
And you have to be very much on your toes and present, don't you, really, to survive in those extreme situations. What have extreme environments and physical challenge and movement taught you about regulating your nervous system?
Well, I guess part of that piece you just touched on is presence in a way. And I think especially for ADHD minds, you can experience something through movement. I get this a lot through rock climbing or through like particular types of skiing where your mind just goes quiet because you enter what's called the flow state. And reaching the flow state happens when the level of challenge meets your level of ability level. And that can be a really powerful place to be because it might be one of the few places in life where your mind can truly be quiet. And if you're somebody who struggles with that, it can be really powerful to experience that. I also think that movement just helps, for lack of better words, move through things. Like sometimes I'll go for a long walk in the mountains, even if it's just a hike, and weird little things of sadness or anger come up that aren't necessarily related to the day. Like nothing happened out there that caused those emotions to arise. But, it'll surface thought loops and things that maybe I'd been pushing down and had enough distraction for in my everyday life. But now that I'm out here just silently walking up this hill and maybe I'm sweating a bit, maybe I'm kind of causing just some physical strain in my body by doing what I'm doing. Now these things are coming up and then you kind of process them out there and work through them. And usually by the end of the hike, whatever those things aren't affecting me in the same way or at all by the end. So I think that you can use physical movement to move through emotional tension, which is very cool.
It certainly is. And your memoir, you have written a book called Without Restraint, which feels very symbolic in many ways. What are the biggest lessons you've taken from your childhood experiences, even the painful ones?
Yeah, Without Restraint, I think ultimately covers my journey, but it can also be one that a lot of people can relate to. We had a lot of people come forward who I never would have expected and said like, oh, I went through really similar things when I was a kid. And even if it wasn't necessarily physical restraint or just going through the special ed system or the mental health system, they had some sort of scars from that and they felt like they couldn't necessarily relate to anybody. So I think one of the big takeaways you could draw from it is that you're not alone. And I think the other big takeaway is that you can get through it. And I think a big part of that is having some sort of passion as a guiding light. I think sometimes people don't necessarily want to open the book because they don't ski or they don't understand skiing. But skiing is really just a vehicle in this book. The book could be about basket weaving. The important thing is not so much the skiing, it's about the passion. And it can be what you learn from the passion, or it can also just be the very nature of having something to love, something to look forward to, if you're really struggling and your everyday life is very challenging, like knowing that at the end of the week or at the end of the month, or even if it's just a couple times a year, there's something that you really love, that you really want to pour your energy into, that you'll get to connect with at some point, can be enough to motivate you to slog through whatever you're going through in your everyday.
Yeah, that joy, having something that really gives you all the feels, all the positive feels, with so many benefits. It's incredible to have a passion. You touched on it. We're talking about finding a passion. So one of the questions I wanted to ask was, can everybody heal emotional dysregulation or mental health struggle by finding a passion? Or is it more nuanced than that?
I think it's more nuanced than that. I think all of the things that I've listed before are certainly, like, I would put them as bullet points on why finding a passion would help. So it's like a yes and a no question. I think you can cover a lot of ground by having something you're passionate about, but it's not necessarily a cure-all. For one, I think an important part of my story is that I went through a lot of misdiagnosis. So a lot of the things that I sort of struggled with, I was mismedicated for, or I was mistreated for. And there's people who, do benefit from medications or do benefit from certain therapies. I don't think anybody benefits from restraint. I wish we would stop doing that. But I don't think that the answer in the story is like you should like quit therapy and you should learn to juggle or to do motocross or BMX biking, like whatever it is. Like, I think you should definitely find something that you love, and I think it'll teach you a lot and it'll help you heal a lot. But I think you should also stay in touch with other ways of healing, be that, meditation and breath work, be that some form of therapy. Every person's different, and what's going to work for them is going to be different. But I wouldn't describe it as this like magical cure-all. If everybody puts a pair of skis on, there'll be no mental health issues.
Yeah, that's great. So passion plus support together,
yes.
Being the winner. Awesome. Now today you are a professional mountaineer. You're a guide, you're an advocate and an author with a documentary coming out soon. Very exciting stuff. So what's happening right now about the work you're doing and the stories you're telling that's exciting you the most?
Yeah, right now what's most exciting is obviously this documentary that you just mentioned that's coming out. The film's called 91. It's going to be shown at the Mount Washington Backcountry Ski Festival. It's also going to be shown at the Maynard Theater of the Arts. I think that's what it's called. It's like not like sticking to the top of my head right now. But that'll be on February 1st in Maynard, Massachusetts. So those are the two locations we have so far. That list will likely expand. But the film is about this story we've been talking about now. But it's also a lot about a big project that I've had over the last 4 years, officially 6 total, of skiing every route in this guidebook called Presidential Skiing. So there's 91 routes in it. All of them are serious steep skiing descents in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. And essentially, I started skiing in the range in 2019, kind of end of 2020, the book came out. And in 2021, I formally announced that I wanted to attempt to ski every route in the book. So that's why I say 4 years officially, 6 total, because I'd already skied a bunch of things that were in the book at that point, but I still had a lot to go. And so I spent years cracking away at it. There were all sorts of challenges because a lot of these lines are very ephemeral. They need super specific conditions to form in safely skiable shape. And a lot of them are also technical. So they might have ice cliffs in the middle that you need to climb up and rappel over in order to ski the line through. They might have really long approaches. So you're walking 15 miles in a day to like ski one run. If you want to go out there and ski 2 or 3, it's this huge day. And maybe there's, 5 or 6 in the area total. So you need to keep coming back to this area again and again and continue to get these conditions to line up. So for the film, we filmed my last 2. One of them is the what I would call the sleeper crux of the whole project. It's kind of one I knew was going to be hard, but I think I underestimated just how hard it was going to be. This route called PF Flyer. And we happened to really score on the conditions on the day we did it, and we were able to ski it without a rope, which there's only a handful of people who have done so. And then the other line is one that I intentionally saved for last called Stovepipe, which is still like a cool and like steep line. But it's one that is regularly in condition. Like pretty much any year you go out in the spring, you can go ski Stovepipe. And it's in an area called Tuckerman Ravine, which is probably the most famous skiing zone in the Northeast, if not in the whole country. And it was where I did my first run in the presidential range and in the guidebook. And I thought it'd be really cool to have the project finisher be in the same ravine. So that was kind of my idea there.
Wow, how exciting. And how long did it take to film the documentary?
So it took 2 days of going out and skiing, which, again, like super fortunate because it's very hard to ski the calendar, and there was a lot of just like trusting intuition that the days I picked were gonna work out. And I don't know, I'd call it like a 1 in a million that we were able to go out and film and ski on the days we were able to, because not only like at the time I had just been taking the winter off, and any day when things were in condition I was just gonna go do it. But to also have it line up with like this random date on the calendar you picked long before you could see the weather, and have there be, low enough wind that you can fly the drone and things like that. Like we scored big time on that. So we only spent 2 days filming the skiing, but then there were like 2 other days, no, like maybe like 3 or 4 other days where we were walking around with cameras, filming like other things, like my childhood home, and we had to get a bunch of B-roll. We got a lot of me in my van, which is like where I am right now, the place that I live. Just, cooking or organizing my gear, or walking around the Mount Washington Valley, looking at stuff, grocery shopping. Like there's so much we filmed that we didn't end up using because you can only fit so much into like a 38-minute segment. But it was really silly, some of the things, just like walking around, like looking at like which sausages to buy with like, Mark standing there with this huge camera. Like people were so confused.
Yeah, acts natural with this big camera. Wow. Oh, that sounds like an adventure in itself. Ryan, if we look at a strategy or a shift or a mindset that works for you, when things feel overwhelming now you've gone through the journey and you understand your brain more and you have lots of support at your fingertips. So when you're feeling overwhelmed mentally or emotionally, what helps you reset or sort of come back into your body?
It sounds really simple, but just if I can step outside and move a little bit, I generally find that helps. It helps to get away from the situation that is causing the dysregulation. Because sometimes you can get stuck in a bubble. I also think, again, like doing challenging activities has helped me, because I think being in the mountains, you learn to solve problems, and you also learn to like really evaluate what's worth being stressed about. And, if it's blowing, 40-mile-per-hour winds and it's, -20 wind chill and you are on an exposed ridge and you need to like keep yourself warm, like that's a problem. That's like a thing worth like getting a little perked up about. But when you're, I don't know, when someone cuts you off in traffic, like it's easier to like step out of that and just be like, this is like not a big deal. Like we're not in a rush. We're not racing daylight. We're not on the verge of getting hypothermic, running out of food. We're not evaluating if this slope is going to avalanche or not. Like it just makes a lot of the like first world problems feel like very simple. But I won't pretend that it's like turned me into like a monk. Like the one thing that still gets to me more than anything is I hate when technology acts up. Oh man. If I spend all day editing and make this like 30-minute video and then I go to share it and it spends like an hour sharing only to tell me at the very end it failed to upload, I could yell at a computer all day. And I need to recognize in those situations, like, okay, like I'm getting myself worked up and staying here next to this computer that's pissing me off and like continuing to like beat my head against the wall is not going to make this get better. I need to just like step away from this and do something else until I feel better.
I love that. I also like earlier when you were talking about perspective, wasn't it? When you're contemplating survival rates at the top of a mountain versus being stuck in rush hour traffic. It's all about perspective. Well done. And I've got another question for you, and that is for young people or parents who feel trapped in systems that don't seem to fit, and you have been there, what would you most want them to hear?
On one hand, what can I really tell those people who are really going through it that is going to be all that meaningful? Because I know how much it sucks and how much I wouldn't have wanted to hear it, because to some degree you're just trying to get through the day when you're stuck in the system. But I think the thing I would say is that there is hope. I want to have my story serve as an example that you can go through all of the things that I went through and maybe the listener is going through and still have a happy and successful life. I think that one of the biggest things that I struggled with when I was still in the therapeutic school system is like I couldn't look around and point to anybody who seemed like they made it. Like there was no one out in the world who was like an icon who like went through this. And I think it's a really, really weird, especially the mental health system, because like we, especially in America, I don't know if it's the same in New Zealand, it's really easy for us to identify with like a rags to riches story. So like when you have somebody that like, grew up and couldn't afford food on a regular basis and, like lived in a really impoverished area and managed to make something of themselves, like that's something that's like glorified and to be proud of. But like when you are going through mental health struggles and all of the struggles are happening inside your head, even though they're very real, they're not as tangible. It doesn't like, you don't hear about those success stories as much, and it kind of feels like, oh, people are going to think this is weird if they knew this. This isn't something to be proud of, but it is something to be proud of because you go through something every day and you continue to show up for yourself and you continue to keep trying. And anyone who does that is admirable.
Talking about success stories, though, Ryan, for those listeners tuning in for today's episode, you surely are one of those success stories. And I do appreciate not the rags to riches when you internalize so much of your mental health experiences, but you being so bold and sharing openly and honestly about your journey is much appreciated and will resonate with so many.
And if you want to read Without Restraint, the book we mentioned, it's available pretty much anywhere books are sold. Sometimes You got to look for the one that's about skiing. There's a couple by the same names that I'm pretty sure are like smut books. So you got to like, it's not the one that's not about skiing.
Absolutely, Ryan. And those links I'll have in the show notes, so listeners will be able to go straight to those notes and link on through to see and hear more of you. Thank you.
Thank you.